But yeah, thank you very much for having me this evening, and it's lovely to see such a great turnout. I feel somewhat intimidated by kicking off your winter series of talks, so I hope you enjoy it. So yeah, I'm Katie Dyke, and I work for the charity called Whale and Dolphin Conservation. And I'm based over in the Moray Firth, over on the east coast, where I run our Shore Watch programme, and I work at the Scottish Dolphin Centre that sits on the mouth of the River Spey. And at the Dolphin Centre, we're very lucky to have the resident population of bottlenose dolphins that we see on the east coast come in really close to the coastline there and feed. So the Scottish Dolphin Centre is a place where we have education and outreach around the bottlenose dolphins that we see on the east coast, and that's where I'm based. But I've been doing this job for nearly 11 years now, which is quite terrifying, but I've been coming to this area for that whole time and doing shore watch surveys from across this coastline, particularly at Clacktoll and Stoer Lighthouse, and collecting land-based whale and dolphin surveys. And I'll go into detail about those land-based dolphin surveys in a bit. But my job entails travelling all the way around the country, around Scotland, meeting community members like yourselves, talking about whale and dolphin sightings and getting out there and doing surveys myself and supporting community members in collecting sightings themselves as well, and then imparting those sightings to our database. So I feel very fortunate that I get to travel around the country and meeting great people and standing on cliffs and looking out for whales and dolphins. A lot of that time is taken up by standing on cliff tops, being blown around and getting freezing cold and looking at empty waters. Well, not empty, there's always something to look, but I'm looking for fins, and sometimes there's not too many fins to be around, so it does mean a lot of patience is required. But in the 10 years of surveying, I have seen a number of whale and dolphin species from around the Scottish coastline, and that's all from standing on the coast, spending hours looking out for whales and dolphins, and not having to get on boats and get out on the water, just surveying from land-based spots. So I mentioned that I work for Whale and Dolphin Conservation, so we shorten that to WDC, and we're a global charity dedicated to the protection of whales and dolphins. So we have our visitor centre over on the east coast of Scotland, but our head office is actually in landlocked Chippenham, down in Wiltshire in England. And I spent time volunteering there when I was younger as well, because I'm originally from that area. And so our work that we do at Whale and Dolphin Conservation, our main mission is to create a world where every whale and dolphin is safe and free. And so we run campaigns where we're looking to change policy and work on an education and ground roots aspect to encourage behavioural changes and inspire and amaze people about these incredible wildlife that we have on our coastlines and all around the world. Our main focuses, our main campaign areas on a global scale are looking at anti-whaling, anti-captivity, and then when we look closer to at home, we're looking at things about like creating safe and healthy seas and environments for these animals to live in. So doing research into looking at the impacts that face whales and dolphins as they go about their daily lives, and inform and influence how we can better protect whales and dolphins when they're out in the ocean. And if you want to find out more about WDC and more about the work that we do, you can go to our website, whales.org, and we have loads of great information on there about the campaigns that we run, but also we have news blogs and articles about interesting stories that are going on around the world and locally at home as well, related to whale and dolphin knowledge and research and science. We also have a great resource on our website that is a cetacean, so a whale and dolphin ID species chart. So you can see all of the different species that are seen around the world, and you can see pictures of them and find out more information about those species as well. So why do we protect whales and dolphins at WDC? We believe that whales and dolphins have a basic right to live, much like you and me. They are extremely intelligent animals. They live in complex family units. They have different individual personalities. They've learnt to use tools, to play, to hunt. We have so many incredible examples of whales and dolphins learning from each other and learning from other species, and even having altruistic tendencies like ourselves to help other species. We've got humpback whales that have been seen countless times to look after other species. So We have seen humpback whales getting in between humans and sharks to save humans from the sharks. We've seen humpback whales putting seals on their backs to protect them from when there's orca around. We've seen bottlenose dolphins learning artificial tricks from one another and then sharing it with their wild population. So there was an amazing story out in Australia, I think, where a bottlenose dolphin was taken into captivity because they were poorly and they were rehabilitated. Whilst they were in captivity, they were watching the captive animals doing what they call in the captive industry as tail walking. So the animals are at the surface of the water and they're pushing their tail along the water and moving vertically along the water. And this wild animal was watching that. When that wild animal got released back into the wild, you were seeing it do this behaviour, it copied it, and it actually then taught its family unit how to do this. So you saw a wild population of bottlenose dolphins exhibiting behaviours that they had learned from other individuals in captivity. You can only put that down to intelligence, watching these animals and figuring out, oh, that looks a bit of fun, I'll do that. You have orcas that live in different parts of the world that pick up fads and trends, much like what we might kind of, what's trending on social media and on a TikTok video, you might see all the young kids doing a certain dance. You see it the same with orca populations. There was a population over on the west coast of Canada that were putting salmon on their heads and just swimming around with these salmon on their heads. And they did it for an entire summer, and they were each other learning from each other how to do it and the coolest way to do it. And then the next summer they decided, oh, actually that's not what we want to do, we're not going to do that this summer. You might have heard of the orca in Gibraltar that are attacking sailboats, and the belief is that the females are going up to the sailboats and they're grabbing the rudder of the sailboat, they're tugging it and ripping it, and then giving it to their young to play with, and then watching their young just playing. And this is one of these fads that they have done for an entire summer, and actually the fad is a bit too good that they're doing it another summer and another summer. So it's probably not this, vicious thing that the orca are doing, they're just having a bit of fun with a big toy that's in the ocean with them. So they are incredibly intelligent species, and this time and time again, they're proving to us how intelligent they are, and that they need to have these wild and free environments to live in to thrive, and they don't do well in captive environments. And sadly, there are a plethora of threats that are affecting their ability to thrive in the wild environment, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Also at WDC, we believe that whales are pretty important for functioning, like the natural biodiversity functioning of our marine environments. We might look at trees, and we automatically know that they are amazing carbon sinks. And when we see images of trees being taken down or forest fires, it sets off a lot of emotions for us of knowing, that's a lot of carbon that is being released out into the environment. When we look at the sea, that sea is also an amazing carbon sink. It's absorbing 40% of the carbon that's created on the planet, and it's actually giving us loads of oxygen. Actually, the ocean is responsible for every second breath that we take. And it's up to the amazing biodiversity in the ocean to make sure that the ocean is functioning as it should, to be working for us as well. And it's these amazing animals like our big baleen whales, the blue whales, 30 meters. It's the biggest animal in the world, and it needs a healthy biodiversity to live, but it also provides that healthy biodiversity in just maintaining a natural process of traveling and feeding and migrating and moving nutrients around the world's oceans and allowing for this healthy biodiversity in the ocean. So we need whales, we need every single animal in our environment to create this healthy biodiversity that we rely on so heavily. So today I'm going to use the word cetacean. Some of you might know that word already and know what it means, but cetacean is basically the scientific order that whales, dolphins and porpoises fall into. So I sometimes just fall into saying cetaceans quite easily, and not everybody knows what it means, so that's whales, dolphins and porpoises. They're also marine mammals, and other marine mammals include things like seals and otters. Because they're marine mammals, they're much like us. They have lungs, they have to come to the surface to breathe. That's why we're lucky enough to see them. So they come up to the surface to let a big puff of air out and to take a big deep breath of air as well before they take their big deep dive back into the ocean. So we've got different groups, we've got different species that are within this group of cetaceans. So we have the baleen whales, which are called the mestascetes. So they don't have teeth, they have these filters throughout their mouths. And something like a minke whale, a blue whale, and a humpback whale are baleen species. So you can see here, this is what the baleen looks like in their mouth. They open their mouth really wide. They fill their mouth full of water. They've got extra folds here in their throat to allow that throat to really extend out, and they can take on board litres of water, including lots of fish in there. So when we were talking about the fry earlier and shoaling fish coming into these areas, that's what our baleen whales are looking for. They're looking for big shoals of fish that they can swim alongside and take massive gulps of water and hopefully take a big mouthful of food as well. So they fill their mouth full of water and food, and then what they do is they push that water across these baleen plates, and the baleen plates basically act as hairy teeth, and they filter out the water and keep the yummy fish inside. Then you've got the toothed whales, and the toothed whales include things like bottlenose dolphins, orca, sperm whales, Risso's dolphins, and it's all in the name, they have teeth. So each different species of dolphins have different number of teeth. We've got bottlenose dolphins that probably have something like 100 teeth, and you have something like a common dolphin that has probably 200 teeth, and you've got Risso's dolphins that actually only have a couple of pairs of teeth in their mouths. They rely on suction a little bit more. And then something like a sperm whale actually only has teeth on one side of its jaw and has sockets at the top and the teeth fit into. Great things about watching particularly bottlenose dolphins is they have a mouth full of sharp teeth. They don't have any flat teeth like us, and if we can put our tongue at the back of our teeth, we can feel our molars, our flat teeth, and we use those to chew. Bottlenose dolphins don't have molars, they don't have flat teeth, which indicates they don't chew their food like us. So you can have some amazing sightings of watching toothed animals, particularly these bottlenose dolphins, feeding. Bottlenose dolphins love to feed on salmon. You can get some big hefty salmon, especially over on the east coast. And what the dolphins do is they grab the salmon, they use echolocation to locate where the salmon is. They grab the salmon with their teeth, and they want to have that salmon eaten it down in whole, and down in a whole animal, not chewing it. And they want it to go head first so that it's comfortable to go down their throat. So you can see them basically playing with their food. They throw the salmon up in the air and make sure it goes down head first and in a nice one foul swoop. Sometimes you can see they kind of get it a little bit wrong and they throw it back up in the air and they have to rejig how the salmon is going down. But you are very fortunate to live in an amazing place. You are looking out to the Minch, and the Minch is an amazing body of water with lots of upswellings in it, lots of deep water. You've got an incredible glacial groove that goes from through the north of the Minch, which we find a lot of baleen species and a lot of dolphin species really use this glacial groove to feed and to travel along. So we kind of see the animals often around that 100-meter mark. They're using the upswellings at that 100-meter mark and the kind of sides of the underwater cliffs to use as tools to hunt and feed, because there's a lot of fish around there and they're using the features in the ocean to help them to fish. So we're seeing in the Minch we get a huge array of biodiversity of different whales and dolphins throughout the year. It's pretty phenomenal all year round. So I work on a project called Shore Watch, and so Shore Watch is basically a citizen science program which we're training and recruiting community members to get involved in surveying for whales and dolphins. We've got some of our Shore Watch volunteers around today here, and we heavily rely on a few individuals around the area that collect data for us and have been doing so for the last 10 years. Then what we ask our citizen scientists to do is to go out and collect 10-minute whale and dolphin surveys. And we're looking at effort-based surveys. So we're recording when we start our survey and when we finish our survey, and we're recording anything that we see or don't see within that survey. So even if we get a negative survey, that's still really important data because we're getting an understanding of trends and what's out there. And so we are also understanding that effort. So if we say, oh my goodness, orca, we are seeing orca so much more in the Minch over the last 10 years, but we've just had incidental sightings, we don't know if actually over the last 10 years, just the effort, you've got more people out there looking. So it's difficult to judge that effort-based and sightings relationship. But because we're recording how often our volunteers are going out, and we're recording how many surveys we're doing, if we do see a big peak in sightings, but our effort has maintained the same, we can see that then there is a significant trend there. So anybody can shore watch, anybody can get involved in the programme. You don't have to have loads of experience in whale and dolphin watching. I run a training session to get everybody up to speed on how to spot different whales and dolphins, and also how to use how to do the survey that we use. Also, we have binoculars, and we have an app, and we have data sheets, and we have all the equipment that volunteers need to have to then start doing those surveys. And we often run quite a lot of group shore watch surveys and socials so that people can get that support. And the best thing about it is that you can do it as and when you want. All of the kit that we have is communally accessed, and so you can literally rock up and do a shore watch survey as and when you want. We have selected sites, so we do ask our volunteers go to these sites because we're collecting long-term data, so we want a data set over a long term from one specific location rather than lots of different data coming in from different areas and regions. If we could, we would have hundreds of effort coming in from all of these different places, but we're trying to streamline where we get that effort from so that we can get the most effort in one region, one area. So here our shore watch sites are at Clacton and at Stoer Lighthouse. But you can do those surveys as and when you want. It might be when you're going for a walk, taking the dog for a walk, or just passing on your way to the shops, or you can get involved with as little or as much as you want. You might do one a week, or one a day, or you might do one a month, or two a year. Any kind of data that you can help us with and provide is really beneficial. And so, yeah, these are where we survey from. So we survey at Stoer. I can spot Alan in the picture already. So we watch at Stoer and we watch at Clacton. Both sites are fantastic for an array of different species, and I'll go over what species we can see from those sites in a bit. So why do we do this? Why are we asking volunteers to collect data for us? We're wanting to collect this data. As you know, you guys are part of the field club. We need to know what's being seen to better understand what we have in our coastal waters. But also, if we didn't have eyes on the sea, recording and monitoring what was going on, things might go unseen, and we might miss trends. We might miss rare species coming into an area, or we might miss that a species actually doesn't use this area anymore. So having eyes on the sea over the long term and being able to record this baseline data set really helps us understand what's happening. And if we're understanding what's happening out there in the water, we can better understand how we protect it and better understand how we inform developers that might come into an area and want to do some work, and we can inform them what is in the area, so what you need to mitigate against or just avoid any work here. We can inform governments on where to put marine protected areas, and we've had lots of examples of using the data that we collect doing just this. So we've worked with SSE, where they've been putting subsea cables in areas where it's important for whale and dolphins. We can provide our data to them and say, you shouldn't do works in this area, you shouldn't do work at this time of year, and we can inform them on what's what's going on in the area so they can best mitigate it. We can use the data when we're writing to governments about consultation. So we can, if there's a consultation of a particular development in an area, we can present the data that we have gathered to say, actually, this isn't the best area to do this, or at this time of year, you shouldn't do it because it's a sensitive area for these species. We've informed the government and we've shared the data with the government to inform where marine protected areas should be. And we've had 2 great success stories about marine protected areas off of the north coast of the Isle of Lewis, so around the north tip, around Point. There's a marine protected area designated particularly for Risso's dolphins. And that is due to shore watch data, other data collected from WDC scientists and other citizen science programs and other scientists as well, inputting data to prove that that area is key for Risso's dolphins, and we're probably seeing a resident returning population of Risso's dolphins in that area. Also, there's a thing called IMAs, which are, they're not a government designation, but they're a global protection scheme that governments and business will use to inform where sensitive areas might be and might use that data to avoid working in a certain area. So IMAs are important marine mammal areas, and there was a consultation recently on the North Atlantic, and it was purely citizen science data, so data collected by you guys, citizens, that informed those important marine areas. And that's a global designation to show where these sensitive areas are. And there was one around Shetland, there was one around the west coast and around the northeast, particularly for minke whales, Risso's dolphins, seals and bottlenose dolphins. And there's industry use the IMA process to inform where they should maybe avoid work. So the big shipping industries have been using the IMA portal to understand where shipping should maybe avoid. So real amazing wins for citizen science being used to really protect whales and dolphins globally and at home. So what are our volunteers seeing out there in the Minch from our sites at shore watch sites? We've been collecting data from Stoer particularly for 12 years and Clactol for about 5 years. So here's our sightings for Clactol. So these are the main species that we're seeing. So predominantly common dolphins. We saw a lot of common dolphins today from Clactol. Then harbour porpoise is our second common, followed by minke whale. But other species we've seen from Clactol include orca, killer whale, Risso's dolphins, bottlenose dolphins that aren't as common on the west coast, they're more common on the east coast, common seal and grey seal. And you can see this graph here is the species seen from 2023 to 2025. You can see the species we've seen throughout the months. So like I said, this area is pretty good for sightings all year round. So we're seeing common dolphins pretty much all year round at the, now. Risso's dolphins through the autumn mostly. What colour's porpoise is? Porpoise is orange again. Porpoise all year round with that peak in the summer. And you can see this line is our effort line. So this is our volunteers that are going out there and surveying. So we have our volunteers conducting surveys through the winter as well. It's really important for them to get out in the winter too. And you can see there is a bit of a peak in summer. Obviously, daylight hours improve, weather improves, it's a bit easier to get out over the summer months. The interesting thing here when we're looking at species, particularly our common dolphins, we can see that we've seen common dolphins through the winter months. We've been pushing for winter surveying a lot more over the last 3 years because things are being seen in the winter, but also it's a bit of a data gap and a bit of missing information about what's being seen in the winter just because of the challenges of getting out in winter and seeing things. But common dolphins are commonly, we see them in the summer, we've always seen them in the summer. They're a temperate species, they like warmer waters. But actually, in the last 10 years, we've been seeing common dolphins a lot more throughout the winter months as well. And particularly in the last few years, we're getting them pretty regularly throughout the winter too. That's probably related to global warming and climate change and the warming of our seas. This year, the seas were kind of record high for temperatures, very warm seas. Something like white-beaked dolphins that definitely were common around in the Minch and on the north coast. They're a subpolar species. They prefer really nice cold water. And as our waters are warming, we're seeing that our white-beaked dolphins are moving further north, and our common dolphins are moving into that area. And so there's challenges for habitat here, and also challenges for like food competition. We have been seeing a lot of white-beaked dolphins off of the Isle of Lewis, so directly opposite from you guys. This summer, we just didn't really see any white-beaked dolphins at all, but the sea temperatures were around 14, 15 degrees. Now they've dropped, the sea temperatures are back around 12 degrees. We're starting to see white-beaks again around the north coast and the Hebrides. So you can really see they're very temperature-related dependent here. So as our water's warm, things will shift and things will move, and we might see differences in the species that we're seeing. This is the sightings that we have from Stoer. Stoer is a bit further up. You're seeing a greater body of water. You've got a lot of height, which is really great for spotting wildlife with that height. You're looking over the North Minch, which is a really, really great area for a lot of different species. Also up at Stoer, you can kind of see this glacial groove that we have that runs along to Jumping Head over on the Isle of Lewis, which is a real hotspot for biodiversity of cetacean species. So here again, you can see harbour porpoises are our main species that we're seeing around Stoer, followed by common dolphins, minke whales. We've got a category for unidentified dolphins. Obviously, when you're up at a headland and you're seeing a grey dot on the horizon, sometimes it can be a bit challenging to ID exactly what species it is. So we have an option where people can write down unidentified dolphins. Our common dolphins that we saw earlier today, we saw literal dots on the very distant horizon line in some splashes. And for a while we were unidentified dolphin, and then they showed a little bit more of themselves to us, so we were more confident that it's a common dolphin. Other species we're seeing, Risso's dolphins, grey seals, again cetacean identified. Really excitingly, we've got fin whales on here as well. This is just the last 2 years of data. We have seen a lot more from Stoer. We've seen fin whales, sperm whales, orca and humpback whales as well from Stoer. I think even a beaked whale as well. But excitingly, the fin whale is the second largest whale in the ocean, the second largest animal in the ocean, and we get them just off our coastline here, which is really exciting. Again, you can kind of see here, the effort is very much in the summer months. I think it's just a bit challenging to get up to Stoer in the winter because of the road and the wind and the rain. But if we could feel the effort in winter for Stoer, that would be absolutely fantastic. Because we might be missing some sightings out there, particularly humpback whales. We tend to see humpback whales through the winter months as well. So it'd be great if we can get some more winter effort in and capture some possible sightings in the winter. But you can see a lot of our sightings of different species are really in this spring, this midsummer section with porpoises all the way through. And I would imagine if we had a bit more effort on the winter side, we would be also seeing common dolphins and porpoises through the winter months also. This is our effort, so we can see from 2018, you can see the effort from Stoer. Obviously this is our fallow coded year, and then you can see the effort starting to increase when we set up the site at Clactol as well. So what are we finding with all the data that we are collecting? So I mentioned we've seen harbour porpoises. So has everybody seen a harbour porpoise here? Do you know what you're kind of looking out for? So a harbour porpoise is one of the smallest, it's the smallest cetacean we have in the UK. Very important animal. We see it in all of our coastal areas around the UK and offshore as well. They're absolutely lovely species to see. You tend to see just a black back, the black animal quickly surfacing through the water and doing this forward rolling motion with a very distinct triangular fin on its back here. If you're lucky enough to be close to them, you even might hear this poof sound as they make a breath out of the water. You tend to see harbour porpoises in small groups of 1 to 2 to 4. In certain areas around the coastline, we have been seeing large aggregations of porpoises, particularly up on the Northern Isles, so in Shetland and Orkney. We've been getting aggregations of about multiple hundreds of porpoises, which is really unusual to see porpoises in that kind of level. We are finding more about porpoise behaviour through drone research. So you can put a drone up in the air. What you might see is 5 porpoises on the surface, seeing their fins. You put a drone up and you suddenly see about 50, 60 porpoises all under the surface of the water. And there's some absolutely beautiful footage of porpoises interacting with each other, being able to see them through the drone footage. And the scientists working on this believe that these large aggregations are purely mating. So they're coming around in big groups and mating, usually through the kind of spring and autumn times we're seeing this happening. And with porpoises, you're used to seeing just this quick forward rolling motion. When they're in these large aggregations, you see some really different behaviour. You see quite different characteristics from these animals. So you see more like dolphin behaviour. You call it kind of rushing as they're moving quickly through the water, and seeing a lot more of the porpoise's body. Because generally, with porpoises, you don't see them breach, you don't see them coming out of the water. But in these large aggregations, they do get a little bit more excited, and you can imagine why. So when we're looking at our data, every 6 years we do a trend analysis of our data that we then use within marine planning. And so what we're finding with our porpoises, these are our protected areas. These are the IMAs that I was talking about, and these hashed out areas are the current marine protected areas. So this is the SAC, special area of conservation designated for porpoises. So last year we had 11,591 shore watches conducted by 228 volunteers, and we record how many people we speak to on every shore watch. So if we speak to members of the public and we educate them about whales and dolphins, we spoke to 8,000 people alone last year. With harbour porpoise, we had 704 on-effort sightings. So that means when we've done our 10-minute survey, we've seen the sighting. Today, we were doing lots of surveys. Every time I said, let's do a shore watch, the dolphins and the porpoise disappeared, didn't we? I don't think we got any on-effort sightings, but we got casual sightings as of today. So you can see here, plus 165 casual sightings. They're regularly seen in all areas, and increasingly recorded. But we're seeing these seasonal peaks around the summer times. Has this got a little light on it, this one? So you see here, this is the seasonal peak that we're seeing here around the summertime. And again, large aggregations in Shetland and Orkney, where tens of hundreds gather. The threats that are facing porpoises include bycatch, noise pollution through like seismic testing and pile driving of turbines, disturbance related to increasing vessel traffic, and prey depletion. And like I was saying, porpoises heavily rely on sand eels. Sand eel populations have collapsed in recent years as well. What else have we got that's interesting in here? You can see here, this one, no, not that one, sea state. So if you've seen porpoises before, you can see that they don't come out of the surface that high. You just see a bit of a back and a triangular fin. The minute when you have gorgeous seas like this, or the one in that picture before, really easy to spot a porpoise. When it's nice and flat calm, you're going to see that black back coming out of the surface of the water. The minute the sea state gets a bit higher, you can see here, at a sea state 0 or 1, our sightings rate is quite high. The minute it gets choppy, we lose ability to see porpoises. So we're missing porpoises when we have worse weather. This one here kind of shows us where we're seeing our porpoises. I'm over on the east coast and the northeast. We're not really seeing porpoises so much on the east coast. Really very much so on the Outer Hebrides and the west coast. My theory around why we don't see so many harbour porpoises on the east coast is we have bottlenose dolphins. We have a large population of resident bottlenose dolphins, about 200 individuals or more, and they're not very nice, and they beat up porpoises and kill them. So a large portion of our stranded porpoises that are biopsied by the team at SMAS, a large portion of those have been killed by bottlenose dolphins if they're on the east coast. So I think harbour porpoises they stay away from the areas where bottlenose are. Minke whales we're seeing on our surveys. Again, minke whales, if you have seen a minke whale, you'll recognise that they're a baleen whale. The minute we start seeing whales, we're looking at a dorsal fin that's 2/3 of the way back their body. When we're seeing porpoises and dolphins, we're seeing their dorsal fin in the middle of their back, so we see it quite quickly. With a baleen whale, like a minke whale, you tend to see them break the surface of the water with their mouth, their snout first. They roll over, they've got this nice long back, and then you see this hooked dorsal fin at 2/3 of the way down. Minke whales aren't hugely active. We don't see them raise their tail flukes like you might with a fin whale or a humpback whale. They don't tend to breach out of the water. You can see it occasionally, but not super common. They just have this same surface pattern as they come out of the water. If you're lucky and there's lots of fish around, particularly in the Minch at the moment, we're seeing a lot of feeding minke whales. So we're seeing aggregations of like 12, 15 minke whales. They are a bit more of a solitary animal, so you tend to see them on their own, but when you're seeing big groups, it just means there's a lot of food in the area and they're coming to the area to feed. So at the moment in the Minch, we're seeing dozens of minke whales coming to the area to feed. And when there is a lot of food around, they do this lunge feeding, which is really exciting to see. They're moving fast in the water, they're opening their mouth and hitting the surface of the water with their mouth open wide, so you can see those baleen plates. Sometimes you can see fish kind of flying out of their mouths too. What we're seeing with minke whales, we're seeing them again. This is actually, I didn't put the regions in, I put the sites in, but Jumpin Head is opposite Stoer. Jumpin Head is on the Isle of Lewis, so again looking under the same body of water that you guys are here, and that's the majority of our minke whale sightings. It's been an amazing year this year for minke whale sightings in the Minch. There's just been lots of baleen whales around. Again, talking about minke whales, we had 203 on-effort sightings of minkies in 2024, so that's last year, with 138 casuals, seen all the way around the coast, but the hot spots, particularly the Minch, so where you are. So here you can see the hotspot areas, and then the Murray Firth, which is over here. And this again is a marine protected area here called the Southern Trench, and you've got the Sea of Hebrides around here as well. Key threats for minke whales include entanglement. So the HWDT team have got a catalogue of minke whales. So every time they see a minke whale on their boat, or citizen scientists see minke whales, you can send a picture into them, and then you can catalogue individuals. Over half of the individuals that they've catalogued have entanglement scars on them. So entanglement scars are caused by either ghost gear, lost at sea, or the line between krill pots, and the animals get entangled in them, and the line then causes severe injury to them. Sometimes it can be not so severe and they can still get by and they don't get infected, but yeah, over half of our minkies seen in the Hebrides have got these entanglement scars, whether it be scarring around their tailstock or around their dorsal fin or their pectoral fins. Sometimes this can lead to death if it's a heavily severe scarring, and it can cause infection. And sometimes entanglements can kill animals because they get so heavily entangled they're kept down and they can't break the surface of the water to breathe. So that's one of their threats that WDC and other organisations are working on at the moment to mitigate. So we're working with the fishing industry to find alternative gears, and there's an amazing initiative at the moment being run by the Scottish Sea Alliance that we are a part of, Scottish Entanglement Alliance, where you can basically just put a bit of lead in the line between krill pots, and it basically sinks the line. So the line between krill pots usually hangs like a big arc in the water. And some of our more coastal baleen whales, like humpback whales and minke whales, as they come into the shallows to feed, and the way they feed, they get heavily entangled in this line, including basking sharks as well. And once they get entangled, they get held down, they can't break the surface to breathe. And there's this really simple solution that you can put lead in the line, which basically sinks the line, and it completely stops the entanglement issue. So we've been working with fishermen, with the Scottish Entanglement Alliance, to get leaded line throughout the fleet in Scotland. Prey depletion again is infecting minke whales along with climate change. The really sad thing about our minke whales are migratory, so we're seeing them through the summer months. So you can see again here, we see them predominantly through from May till October time, and then some sightings around the winter months. They migrate from the Arctic, so they're in countries like Norway and Iceland, and these countries still whale, and they still have quota for minke whales. So actually the animals that we see in our waters are under threat of whaling when they go back up into the Arctic regions. Common dolphins, I kind of spoke about common dolphins before, about how we're seeing more of them through the winter months and probably pushed by climate change. Common dolphins are a pretty amazing species to see. They are super, super fun. We were seeing huge leaps out of the surface of the water today. They can sometimes break the surface of the water a good 10 feet out of the water. Every time I've seen a common dolphin, I can't help but squeal when we see them racing towards a boat and trying to bow ride. If you go on the Calmac over to the Hebrides, this is one of the common species that you're seeing bow riding towards the boats. And they seem to really enjoy it. They kind of beeline towards the boats to bow ride on them. The main identifying feature for common dolphins, much smaller in size to some of our other species of dolphins that we see. They're sleek and slender. They've got this really long, sleek beak, and they've got this very distinct hourglass pattern on their body. So this is yellow at the front, and it goes down to a lighter colour. So they've got a very predominant dorsal fin. So again, you can see where we're getting common dolphins. So we're getting them around the Outer Hebrides in the West Highlands. Not so much in the other regions that we watch from. Small numbers. Some common dolphins do come into the Moray Firth, and not very common. A little bit more common around the north coast here, and then some in Orkney. Not getting them up as far as Shetland, but you can see a lot of hot spots around here in the west coast, particularly in the Minch. I did a boat crossing from Stoer to Ullapool 2 weeks ago, and the entire crossing was just teeming with common dolphins. They were absolutely everywhere, and lots of young as well. So on effort in 2024, we had 306 sightings, plus 125 casual. Highest occurrence in the west coast and the Hebrides and West Highlands, with a seasonal peak in the summer. But a general increasing trend over time we're finding, with large offshore pods. So common dolphins, we tend to see them commonly in groups of 30, 60, 100, but you can be seen in multiple thousands offshore. Some of the threats that they're facing is bycatch and entanglement, underwater noise, prey depletion, and busy seas, and again, climate change. And you can see here the peak in summer that we're seeing, and this steady trend upwards over the last few years. So the great thing about citizen science, nice candid show here, everyone. The great thing about citizen science is that we can use this data to support other research as well, other scientists. Time and time again, other scientists are approaching us to ask to use the data that you guys and our volunteers are collecting. This year particularly, we were working with a scientist called Thomas Webber, and he was using all of our shore watch sightings data related to Risso's dolphins. And he was even coming and doing shore watch surveys himself here to get more data on Risso's dolphins. And this was because this area, the west coast, has been identified as a good spot for Risso's dolphins, and they've got acoustic monitoring all along this coastline. So this scientist set up some acoustic monitoring spots along Clacton and Stoer and installed these devices, and he was wanting land-based visual sightings to verify what the acoustic monitoring was picking up. Acoustic monitoring is brilliant, but it's not great at identifying between species. So obviously, us as shore watch people, we can survey through daylight hours, we can't really survey at night, and we can't really survey in bad weather. So having acoustic monitoring also allows us to see and survey at times that people aren't able to do it, and particularly through darkness and winter. And looking at acoustic monitoring data of particular species, you can see that they are feeding quite a lot at night time as well. But the great thing about this project was this scientist was using the acoustic sounds that was being picked up on these devices and programming an AI system to be able to detect rhesus dolphins. And utilising us as visual observers, he could ground truth that and prove that the AI model could actually pick up rhesus dolphin sightings. And again, that data then supports understanding better about where rhesus dolphins are being seen and how they're using areas across the coastline. So shorewatch data is always feeding into other scientific work as well, which is brilliant. Again, a really cool thing about rhesus dolphins. Has anybody seen a rhesus dolphin? They're one of my favourite species, I think. I think they're just so cool. They don't really look like any other iconic dolphin that you think of. They're kind of like the bruiser of the dolphin world. They're covered in scars that you can see here. They're big, they're about 4 meters, they're chunky, they don't have a beak. They have this really tall, distinct dorsal fin that almost looks as straight as an orca's fin, that people can get confused and mis-ID rhesus with orcas, and particularly the way they move, they kind of break the surface of the water and then they sink back down. But we are working on an identification catalogue of rhesus dolphins. So if you see rhesus dolphins and you get a good picture of them, you can actually identify individuals by these scars on their body and by nicks and scars in their dorsal fin. You can do this with pretty much all species of cetaceans, but we're running a project looking particularly at rhesus dolphins. And this area is very good for rhesus dolphins. So if you do ever get any pictures, please do send them along to me. And the way they get these scarrings on their body is one from interactions with each other, but the other way is also their prey species. I mentioned before that these guys don't have many teeth. They don't have a beak, so they're suction feeders. And as they're sucking up their prey, which is squid, the squid have hooks on their tentacles and they're scratching them all over the body, so causing these scariations. The older individuals that you see might be all white, but it also shows them as amazing predators as well, because they are so scarred up because they're so successful at feeding. Rhesus dolphins and bottlenose dolphins have done a cool thing, and they've actually hybridized. So over on the west coast of on the Outer Hebrides, on the Isle of Lewis, around points, we're seeing individuals that look a little bit like rhesus dolphins and a little bit like bottlenose dolphins. So I've seen a couple of individuals that look really like bottlenose dolphins, smooth grey body, but then they've got really stubby little beak and a really tall, distinct dorsal fin. And so we've been tracking them, and other scientists have been tracking them for a number of years. Probably the first one was spotted about 15 years ago, and so we have a group of hybridized rhesus dolphins and bottlenose dolphins that can be seen around Stoer as well, and on your coastline as well. They have been photographed from Stoer. It does make identification pretty tricky, because you think you've got your dolphin species down and then you see a hybridized animal that looks like a combination of the two. And the cool thing is they notice that the individuals also can give birth, so they are able to reproduce, in which not all hybrids can. So other species we've seen throughout the years are orca. This is a special pod of orca called 17s. This individual here is called is the matriarch. She's the lead female that leads the group, and her name is Musa. She's also called number 17, and that's why you might hear sometimes individuals of groups of orca are called 64s or 17s or 19s. So she's 19, sorry, not 17. And it's usually the name associated to the matriarch of the group. So orca and other dolphin species are matriarchal, so the female leads the group and runs the shop. And this group are a group of Icelandic orca that spend most of their time around Iceland feeding on herring, and then come about April, May time, they get a bit bored of Iceland and they get a bit bored of herring, and Musa decides to bring her family down to Scotland, and she's seen around Orkney and Shetland, and then she's seen around the northeast coast and the very north coast of Caithness, and then they do a pretty big tour all around Scotland for a good few months. So we see them predominantly through the late spring, early summer, and early summer times, and then they move back up to Iceland. But the really interesting thing about this group of orca is they switch their prey when they come down here. So they're a fish predominantly fish-eating species group up in Iceland, but then when they come to Scotland, they switch and they feed on seals. And there's fish-eating orca and marine mammal-eating orca, and they communicate and they hunt in different ways. So fish-eating orca are often a lot noisier. They're chatting all the time. They're communicating about where the fish is because the fish aren't using sound and hearing their predators. Where marine mammals are all about sound. So marine mammals are listening all the time for where echolocation or where their food is or where their predators are. So the orca that feed on marine mammals are very quiet, and they don't communicate all the time because they need to have stealth to capture marine mammals. So it's really interesting that these animals have adapted to be pretty supreme hunters on both sides. And they've been seen to eat seals, guillemots, otters, dolphins as well. So they're very opportunistic in what they feed on. We've had fin whales recorded from Stoer, the second largest animal in the water. So we were talking about the surfacing pattern of a minke whale. With a fin whale, you just see this massive long back and the dorsal fin much further along the back. Sometimes you can see them raise their tail fluke. This is the telltale sign of a big baleen whale. You see that massive blow. So with a fin whale particularly, you'll see this really tall blow. It'll be possibly 8 meters high, and it will stay in the air for a good 30 seconds to a minute, and you'll see that blow. And you get very excited that you've seen that. They're a huge animal. We do tend to see bottlenose dolphins. Like I said, on the east coast of Scotland, we have our resident population of bottlenose dolphins, of about over 200 probably now, and that their distribution is really expanding through the whole of the east coast, even going down to North England. On the west coast, you have a much smaller population of resident bottlenose dolphins that travel across a much wider area. We tend to see them in the South Minch, around the South of Skye, around Barra. They don't tend to travel up to the northern Minch that much, but we are seeing them. We saw them on a shore watch earlier this year, and they are seen around the Hebrides a fair bit as well. I've kind of touched on some of these threats already facing our marine mammals. So, they're going about their daily lives. They're using sound to communicate with each other, to find their food, to also navigate and travel. But unfortunately, as they're going about their daily lives, they're kind of moving through a maze and a myriad of different threats that are anthropogenic, so caused by us, and that they have to navigate their way around. So one big thing that's hitting different species at the moment is climate change, which is driving distribution changes of prey species. So these animals have to adapt, try to adapt quickly to that, which is very difficult. Our seas are becoming busier. We've got more developments happening. We've got more boat work and boat traffic, so creating a lot more noise that these animals have to navigate around. We've got a lot more recreational boats on the water. I was talking to Andy a few years ago, and he said, 10 years ago, he just had kayaks coming to the campsite. The last 5 years, you're getting bigger horsepowers and bigger boats coming. All of that is causing impact to our coastal marine animals. So, it's wonderful to see whales and dolphins whilst you're on the water, but there is a wildlife watching code that ensures the protection of you and those animals. So it's encouraging people not to get too close and be respectful when we're seeing these animals. I already spoke about entanglement with krill pots and what we're doing and other organisations are doing on that. Unfortunately, fisheries is probably the biggest threat to these animals in terms of bycatch. These animals are feeding on often the same things that we're like to feed on, and so as they're feeding and big trawl nets are coming through, they can accidentally catch common dolphins and porpoises, and predominantly in those nets, and then they die. Unfortunately, our seas are becoming more polluted, and we've got these things called forever chemicals running through our rivers into our oceans, and our resident population of orca on the west coast is now only at 2 individuals, Jonco and Aquarius, and they haven't successfully reproduced in 30 years, and that's because they're heavily loaded with toxins. And it's PBCs that were banned in the 80s, but these animals are top of the food chain, and they're feeding on heavily fatty animals like other marine mammals, and toxins sit on fat tissues. So if you're at the top of the food chain, those chemicals just build up in you, bioaccumulation. So we're seeing that. So it's really important, the work that WDC is doing to try and mitigate these threats, and it's really important that we try and make behavioural changes in our lives to lessen these impacts in these animals. I'm sorry I've ended on a bit of a downer there. Apologies, but I'm hoping there'll be questions. So feel free to ask any questions that you have. If you want to get involved in the Shore Watch programme, you can contact me at shorewatch@wales.org, and we can talk about training and things. Just as a little caveat to that, I'm actually taking a 6-month sabbatical at the end of next month, so my colleague James, who was with me, is going to be supporting the Shore Watch programme over the next 6 months. So it will be probably James if you get in touch with us. But yeah, any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask. And thank you for listening to me waffle on.
Is anything known about the effects of increasing numbers of wind turbines, either rooted or floating, in the North Sea, for example, on cetaceans in that area?
Yeah, so it's the development phase that impacts cetaceans. So you can imagine with the seismic testing, when they're testing out where they're putting the turbines, all of that seismic testing is added noise in the water, and it's at a frequency that disturbs whales and dolphins. So you've got the seismic testing that displaces animals from the area, and then the development phase. So when they're pole driving, when they're putting things in and they're working in the area, it's proven to displace animals from the area. So it displaces cetaceans for a period of time. When it's fully functioning, research shows that the animals come back. There's no proof that it's the same animals, so you don't know if it displaces certain family groups, certain individuals, and those individuals never return, but definitely individuals do return. And I've heard reports, particularly in the Beatrice around Caithness, that we've been seeing increased porpoises and Risso's dolphins in that area, and actually the East Coast now is becoming just as good for Risso sightings as the West Coast. And there's lots of footage of the bases of the turbines actually acting as artificial reefs, and with loads of nurseries. So there's lots of squid eggs and cases around the bases. And they actually also act as a no-fish zone. So fishermen don't fish there because it's dangerous. So then we also don't have that added impact of fisheries. So it's mostly the development phase. And we would still say that wind turbines need to be put in areas that are not a significant protection level because of that pile driving, and we would always comment on as many consultation processes as we can and enforce proper mitigation. But there's also climate change is having a massive impact on these animals as well. We need green energy, so it's a bit of a sticky one, but definitely there is an impact at the development phase.
The two platforms that they're putting in the money first for these wind turbines, has there been any consultation about that?
No. So last week was the first pretty much anybody heard of it. And so it's the Murray Flow Park, and so it's going to be structures. So it's not going to be a flow park in terms of wind turbines being there, but it's it's basically going to be like a floating harbour they're proposing, and then they're going to store large equipment there. We haven't seen any of the plans, so they've done two years of surveying, and I would imagine that surveying is related to functionality of the sites. So they've looked at a various amount of sites, and they've looked at the feasibility of actually doing the work. They haven't done any environmental stuff yet, so that whole process is still to come. So there's going to be a consultation process, the environmental impact assessments will be done, we will comment on every step of that. It's a ridiculous idea. It's in a marine protected area for
the fishermen are up in arms.
The fishermen are up in arms. It will like when we don't know the plans yet, they haven't told us the plans, but they're going to be large structures, heavy large structures that are in the North Sea for housing things in the winter. so they're going to be out there at all weathers. It's in very shallow water, and so it's going to have a massive impact on the substrate of the salmon there. But also you're going to need a lot of chain to keep them down, so it's going to be full of chain, and that's 100% going to impact the movement of these animals. I've seen bottlenose dolphins fishing in meters of water along that coastline. There's basking sharks there, there's minke whales there, and you've got entanglement issues around the chain as well. You've got noise from the chain, noise from the development, and noise from the increased traffic. It's a terrible idea, and it's an outstanding area of natural beauty, and it's going to be in very coastal water, like very shallow coastal water. It's going to massively impact tourism as well if it goes forward. But it's very much the beginning phase, so there's still that whole consultation process to go through. And so they are expecting that to be like 2 years. They think that they're going to put it in place in 2027, even if they, I don't think that will happen in 2027, even if they get all of the things in place.
Just
But
seems to be driven ahead anyway.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, the Chinese are coming in to build these things, and it's a good thing for getting our WDC running again. But
our WDC is already running. And also the impact of tourism, like that whole area is massively, we've got a huge amount of tourism in that area. Probably tourism is most of the, like a lot of the industry, a lot of the income, and it will, and Birkhead is one of the last fishing ports around that area, and there's a lot of fishing boats that go out from there. So yeah, it's a terrible idea, and there's a lot of community members, not just fishermen, that are up in arms about it, and we will be commenting on it. So yeah, it will be a long process.
Those dolphins are
it's a protected area.
It's just like
there should be
money talks.
there should be a standard in which, if you've got a designation for a marine protected area for a sensitive species, and we know that the species use that area, you shouldn't be developing stuff like that.
No.
So fingers crossed we'll be able to, the environment, like the actual now consultation process will go through, and they'll realise it's not a suitable area for a myriad of reasons: fishing, tourism, wildlife, environment. Yeah.
Talking about wind farms, I actually sailed up the east coast this year on a cruise ship on the Balmoral, but I couldn't believe what I knew looking out from St Andrews is horrific.
There's a lot.
You know, and then the one at Wick is unbelievable size.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah, even
we
up
can see
that
it.
road.
We can see it from the road, but
I couldn't believe how many windmills were on that coast.
A lot more to come. They're talking about thousands, so there are hundreds.
I don't think they're increasing the Beatrice. I don't think.
No.
Beatrice is done. Yeah. I think off the east coast. Yeah, they're going to put some around Berwickshire, aren't they?
Yeah, that's the only thing I really talk about because I like the office. But when I saw off St Andrews, I was like, what? From her, that's the biggest attraction there for the old course and stuff. And I looked out and I went, what?
And this one in the Murray Firth is just a storage place, so it's going to be.
I know that's
big.
going to build the thing.
It's just going to be big. It is going to look like a shipyard. Did you have a question?
I just wonder whether you think the number of strandings is increasing.
Yeah. So we work quite closely with the stranding team. So there's another organisation, the Scottish Marine Mammal Project, and they're called SMAS. And so anytime you find a stranded animal, you can report that stranded animal to the SMAS team. And they do amazing work. They can understand all the postmortems. And they recently released a report to say that in the last decade, strandings have gone up threefold. That, again, what I was mentioning earlier about effort, it could be slightly to do with effort that more people are noticing and phoning things in, but there does seem to be a lot more strandings and a variety of different species as well.
So big, aren't they?
Yeah.
Such large numbers.
It's large numbers, yes. We're having mass strandings of things like pilot whales. We saw them, they've been stranded on the Isle of Lewis a few years ago, then another stranding in Orkney. Some strandings are natural. So some strandings are just a natural cause of death. I was involved in a stranding of a white-beaked dolphin in Bucky, and he was just a really old individual. Like he just, some individuals, you know, they want to strand and die on the water rather than die out of the water rather than die at sea. So sometimes, you know, they just get confused and they come up and they strand, but it's a natural cause of death. It's not man-made. Other strandings are related to largely entanglement and bycatch, and then there's noise implications there as well. So, like I was saying, the oceans are getting more noisy, and it's not just from like wind turbines and things like that. You've got military exercises. The Minch is used for military exercises. There was a stranding 10 years ago off of Durness, maybe probably longer than 10 years ago now, off of Durness, and that was directly related to underwater detonation around Garth Island. So you're looking at animals that, particularly, so when we look at the pilot whales, they're deep diving animals. They hear and they communicate at a certain frequency, and when you've got underwater detonations going off, it's like a bomb going off next to us. You know, you're completely disorientated. I've never experienced it, but like even in the nightclub or something, you know, having loud sound, you're disorientated. You can't hear your friend. And these animals need sound to not only communicate to their friends, but to eat, to find their food, and to find their way. So when you've got things like pilot whales that are out in the depths, they live in deep water, they navigate in deep water. If you have a big loud sound that disorientates them, pushes them into shallow water, then when they get into shallow water, they can get into trouble. So then they're disorientated, they're in a shallow area where the bathymetry is difficult, and when they come into troubles, like I think some of the animals that have been seen in the stranded instances, it's where one of the females is struggling giving birth, and so pilot whales are incredible. They're hugely empathetic species. Their family unit is really important to them. If one animal strands, they will all go with that animal and support that animal. So if the female is struggling giving birth, they're all can run around and help that female come up to the surface and breathe. They'll help bring the animal up to the baby up to the surface. And if you're doing that in an area that you shouldn't be, so they've gone out from the deep into the shallow, into a difficult area of bathymetry, and then they hit a shallow bit of water because they're focusing on helping another member of their family, and then they strand. So yeah, these disturbances are pushing them into areas that they shouldn't be.
And do you have any influence with the MMG? Do they have some advice before they go in to see?
Excuse my word. How do you see the future?
How do I see the future? I feel like you asked me this last year. You came to a talk in where I had my humpback whale in Timber, and you asked me the same question. I think when I get the fortunate role of working with communities, and when I work with communities, it does give me a lot of hope, because there's a lot of people that care, and there's a lot of people that want to stand up for the rights for the marine environment and the animals that live in it. And you know, there is power in our voices, and the politicians do have to listen to our constituents and voters. And so I do get a little bit of hope, extra hope, working with like-minded people that feel passionate about standing up for whales and dolphins. And I also get to see these animals on quite a regular basis, and that really helps. Like when you're out there and you're seeing them and you see the excitement of other people getting to see them, and I get that excitement as well. And there are populations, there are positive stories around the world. We're seeing an increase in humpback whales, which is brilliant. In the last 10 years, we've seen a lot more humpback whales on our Scottish coastlines. And that's really exciting because we get to see them, like these incredible species we're seeing breaching off of our coastlines. But it's also could be a great story around actually marine protection areas, helping reducing fisheries in certain areas, helping to allow fish stocks to regenerate. You know, around Gairloch there's a regeneration of herring that probably is bringing those large baleen whales into the Minch. You've got countries that have banned whaling and countries that hopefully will ban whaling, and so things like minke whales and some areas, fin whales,
we're seeing populations bouncing back. Not all populations are bouncing back from whaling, but particularly some populations of humpback whales and fin whales have. So there are positive stories around.
I think if you've got any more questions for Katie, we could ask it while we're having our tea, so that we don't run too late. But thank you so much for that really fascinating talk. I'm so grateful for the Whale and Dolphin Conservation for all their good work they're doing, and really inspiring, and makes you want to get out there and have a go yourself. So thank you so much. And